So welcome to our third quarterly check-in. We are excited about today's work. Um, we have a lot of guests with us today, and we're going to let them introduce themselves. If we can go to the next slide, please, before we start getting into things. And one of the things like we like to remind folks of just our inclusive meeting guidelines, thinking about that we want to engage everyone. So it's great. I see you all on camera and love to see your smiling faces. And we understand if you're needing to grab lunch, definitely okay. No one's going to judge. We also ask that if you're not speaking, to mute your microphones so that we don't have to deal with any background noise. And if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please don't forget, just raise your hand and we will acknowledge you. And if you have some technical support needs, please ping Ray. She will support you in that. If we can go to the next slide, please. I think everybody's feeling welcomed right now. I am. All right, we can go to the next slide. And our facilitators today and folks that are here with you and supporting you, we have Carolyn with the department. Carolyn, you want to say hello to everyone?
Thank you. Yes, welcome everyone. So glad you're here with us today.
Thank you. And then we have the director of the Region 12 Comprehensive Center. Dale, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy May 1st. Hard to believe we're already into the month of May. Crazy. So good to see you all today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And Christina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am the co-lead for the Region 12 Comprehensive Center for Colorado with Dale. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Christine. And Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Jessica Giffen. I'm one of our facilitators for the Region 12 Comprehensive Center.
Thank you, Jessica. And Robin and Damari could not be with us on today, but they'll be with us during our next adventure together. But again, I'm Beth Hart Brown, and I am here in South Carolina. And it's a cold day here today. And we had sunny skies this weekend, but today the weather has just really taken a turn. If we can go to the next slide, please. I know a lot of you probably could say similar things. Here are our objectives for the day. First, we're wanting to understand the research on the challenges and unique conditions of recruiting and retaining educators in rural settings. So excited about this work. Years ago, I had conducted a lot of research in the rural education space. So I really am looking forward to the conversations today. And we're also going to learn about the resources that are available in Colorado for rural districts and educator preparation programs to actually support the recruitment efforts in this space. If we can hit that, I think there's one more. Thank you. And then also discover some of those strategies to help districts and schools strengthen their workforce. Thank you. And then as well as look at some of the challenges and some of those best practices and lessons learned from the work. So we're going to actually hear from some district and school leaders in this space because they have figured it out. And we're looking forward to that conversation. All right, I am going to turn this over to the National Rural Education Association because they are going to be sharing some of their findings with us on today. And I see Sarah and I don't see Kessa, I don't think.
Kessa is unable to be with us today, but you have me and then you have Sarah Schmidt-Wilson as well.
Wonderful. And Sarah, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and Sarah, the two Sarahs are going to introduce themselves, and I'll turn this over to you. And Ray will give you control so you can present your slides.
Awesome. Thank you. I will go ahead and screen share then to get us started. So Sarah and I are here today. My name is Sarah Hartman, and Sarah and I are here today representing the National Rural Education Association's Research and Higher Education Subcommittee. We were among a group of people who worked on co-developing through a large research study, the Rural Research Agenda for 2022 to 2027. As I said, I'm Sarah Hartman, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Teacher Education at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And Beth, it is also cold here today.
And my name is Sarah Schmidt-Wilson. I'm an assistant teaching professor at Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana.
So we, in a short amount of time, are going to tell you a little bit more about the research agenda and the process that went into developing this research agenda. Before we get started, is there anyone, and you could just use the raise your hand feature or the thumbs up feature if you have that in Zoom, is there anyone here who is familiar with or who has checked out the research agenda? It just came out in the fall of last year. Okay, well, it seems like this may be a little bit new for some of our participants today, so that's great. We are a committee of 5, so Sarah and I, actually 6. Sarah and I are just 2 members. Our other members are Kat Biddle, Pam Buffington, Erin McHenry-Sorber, and Kessa Roberts. These 6 of us started off quite a long while ago to investigate rural perspectives of what the research priorities and needs in rural schools should be for this next 5-year research agenda. We really took a holistic approach in trying to get perspectives from a very wide range of people, from policymakers to practitioners, school leaders, researchers, a very wide range. And Sarah's going to tell you a little bit more about the research process that we took.
So in terms of the process, we started off with a survey that was sent to all members of the National Rural Education Association. And we received 328 completed surveys. About 65% of these were from preschool through 12th grade practitioners, so people who were in the field and in rural settings. Then we followed up with 9 interviews that lasted from 25 to 60 minutes each. And then our research was gathered using 6 different focus groups with 4 to 6 participants. So this process took several months, and it was both quantitative and qualitative in nature. So from this process, we used all of the information and came up with 5 different themes and one kind of overarching theme, spatial and educational equity, that is related to the remaining 5 themes. So college and career trajectory, policy and funding, health and wellness, partnership and community relationships, and then teacher preparation, recruitment, and retention, which is what we're going to focus on today.
As Sarah mentioned, at the center of the research agenda is spatial and educational equity. And spatial equity is something that people have been very aware of for a very long time, but we haven't always referred to it as spatial equity. So we like to start off when we're talking about the research agenda by talking a little bit about what spatial equity is. And spatial equity refers to the way that resources and services and opportunities may be allocated across space and related to geographic location. So it's the ability to be able to access and the ability for there to actually be access to particular resources and services. It is often characterized by spatial inequity, which would be the inability to access resources, services, or opportunities, and the ways that that interacts with geographic location. So I know that probably everyone on here could think of an example of this, but in relation to rural contexts, this impacts things like access to mental health, fresh foods, medical care, clean water, broadband, access to museums, after school opportunities, summer activities, dual enrollment programs, early learning opportunities. We could probably go on and on. Spatial equity is something that impacts all of those things in rural settings. And so this, along with educational equity, really became the core of the research agenda. And of importance, you'll note that on that original, and we can go back and look at that slide, but these different, the core and then the 5 themes that surround it are intersectional, because it would be very difficult to say that any one of these things are a standalone topic. They are all related to one another, and they are all related to spatial and educational equity. So what we'd like to share next are some actual quotes that came from the research project that was conducted in order to develop the research agenda. We saw these responses across surveys, interviews, and focus group participants. There were 2 major categories that we're going to share these quotes from. The first is how equity or inequity is related to diverse identities and social circumstances within the rural school and community. And the second is that idea of spatial inequity, or how equity challenges are related to place. And so those are the 2 categories that are present in these quotes. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I will read the one that is bolded. More work needs to be done on the intersection of race, SES, and other aspects of power/privilege with many of the topics above. There is research, for example, that exists on many of these topics, but does not speak to the experiences of minoritized or marginalized populations. And again, we want to stress how these topics and themes are intersectional in nature, and how they are all connected. So we're here today to talk to you specifically about that one theme related to teacher and leader preparation, recruitment, and retention. And we're going to talk a little bit about the survey responses related to that, and then more about that category.
So when we sent out the survey, we had 15 different research topics, which were loosely based off of the previous NREA research agenda. And then we did add in some. But when we sent out the survey, we just asked for them to talk about what they felt each area was from their lowest priority to the highest priority. So we showed both the percent of people who gave it 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5, as well as the average, just to look at it holistically. So when we looked at the survey response categories, recruiting, retaining, preparing rural educators and administrators came in second only to the impact of policy on rural schools. As you can see, a majority of the people who responded thought that that was a high priority. And then we looked at it a little bit more in depth by looking at these cool waffle charts. And we looked at the percentage of people who gave it 5s all the way down to 1s. And as you can see, a majority, 57%, said it was highest priority. And an additional 29% said that it was a major importance. So majority of people thought that recruiting and retaining rural educators was really, really important for us to be looking at. There's a lot of blue and not a lot of orange. So when we looked at the more qualitative responses, here's some of the things that they said about teacher and leader preparation, recruitment, and retention. And again, I won't read all of them to you. I'll just highlight some of them. Preparing, recruiting, and retaining quality educators and leaders was identified as one of the most pressing issues for rural schools, one that was exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. Then on the next slide. Recruiting, retaining, and preparing educators for rural setting is my highest priority because lots of other problems fall off once there is quality educators being retained. It was mentioned for all areas, but it was especially highlighted for areas like special education and mathematics and science. They also talked about, I think the capacity to meet diverse needs is tied to teacher preparation. So what they're learning in their teacher education programs. Without quality people, nothing moves forward. Salaries matter, quality of life matters, benefits matter. Rural school boards often do not know how to recruit and support their professional staff members, starting with the superintendent. So it wasn't just teachers that they're seeing shortages of, it's everybody in the whole education pipeline. So teachers, staff, and school leaders as well.
that is some of the data that was presented through both the survey and the qualitative responses. And we also want to just briefly share with you what some of the overarching challenges were that were identified in relation to both preparing teacher candidates in order to work in rural schools, but then also that second piece, which is recruiting them to come there, and then once you get them there, convincing them to stay in rural schools. So just briefly, some of the things that came from this data is that some common challenges in rural teacher preparation are lack of experience in rural contexts. So we often find that teacher candidates both have no personal experience in rural contexts, and that also it may be difficult for teacher preparation programs to arrange for clinical experiences to occur in rural contexts, in rural schools. Especially making those be really rich and experiences that really embed them within those schools. The political landscape and proposed legislation can also be a barrier in rural teacher preparation. There is a lot of, as many of you are, I'm sure, are aware, there's a lot of legislation across the 50 states related to this. Rural schools also experience deficit-based perspectives. And this is seen in popular media. It's seen across a lot of different spaces in terms of how rural schools are presented. And that shows up in teacher preparation. Faculty preparation and experience can also be an issue. So in some teacher preparation programs, there are faculty who do not have a lot of experience in working with rural schools. Or in rural contexts. And so that can also become a challenge in preparing teachers to work in those contexts. And then finally, there is and continues to be a lack of research about rural teacher preparation and what that actually looks like. So that's in terms of preparing candidates to through teacher preparation programs. But once we actually have our teacher candidates and they've graduated, how do we get them to come to rural schools? And then how do we get them to stay in rural schools? And there are a lot of common challenges associated with that as well. Pay equity is always at the top of the list. One of the more common occurrences is that many schools in all locales have increased their first year or first couple of year salaries for new teachers. But what you see is that there continue to be inequity as teachers stay in districts. So the top level of those salaries are often inequitable between locales. Access to professional development continues to be an issue. A lack of racial diversity or a perception sometimes of racial diversity. Again, the political landscape, personal identity and how safe particular people feel in disclosing their own personal identity within communities can also be a challenge. Access to housing, access to healthcare, and then finally, job opportunities for partners who are coming with teachers. These all tend to be challenges for recruiting and retaining teachers. And we were asked to speak on the challenges, but we also want to be clear that there are a lot of benefits to working in rural settings. And we are both very strong advocates for rural education and for rural teachers. And so we're excited about the rest of the meeting and what you all will be talking about in terms of innovation and strategies for preparing, recruiting, and retaining teachers in rural settings. What we are presenting now are the findings from this research study that was conducted in order to create and develop the rural research agenda. So we don't think we have very much time for questions, but we do have a QR code up here if anyone is interested. There is a manuscript in the Rural Educator that tells you even more about the development of the research agenda. And so if you would like to read more about it, we would definitely encourage everyone to do so, because there are several other themes that we did not get to talk about in this presentation. And we, of course, are also very willing to talk about the research agenda with anyone who is interested. We are very excited about this work, and we do hope that the research agenda will lead to promising practices for many different rural contexts.
Thank you, Sarah and Sarah. truly appreciate you sharing just the rural challenges and the context that you brought forward, and as well as the document. And for those of you that did not get an opportunity to open up the QR code, we will make certain to share the document that they shared. It's the National Rural Education Associate Research Agenda for 2022 to 2027, a closer look at the research priorities. I was able to catch it, so I will make certain that you all get it as well. Any questions that you might have for the association, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I know our time is limited today, but we would love to share any questions that you have with them. We can actually have them placed in the chat. So if you think of anything that comes top of mind. But as you think about the actual session that they just presented, what really resonated with you from the research agenda, especially with the conditions for recruiting and retaining educators in rural settings? Thank you, Sarah, for dropping that in the chat. I know, having worked in a rural setting for a number of years, a lot of things came to mind, and it was just like confirmation at times of some of those challenges that I remember facing as a teacher coming up first year. I'm out of college thinking I'm gonna have all this great stuff in my classroom, and resources didn't allow that. But my principal was kind to say, well, we can work on it. And 15 years later, he was still working on it, but it's all good. Anything that resonated with you?
Sure.
I was waiting for you, Bob. Welcome.
The intersectionality of the problems, and I would say that one of the key access issues that I didn't see in the research, but I'm assuming it's there somewhere, is access to higher ed. And in virtually every conversation I have with rural leaders, the issue of lack of access to higher ed comes up, and the way that access needs to show itself is through online learning. And when you are working with communities in rural Colorado, you will all inevitably come into contact with a number of people who are actually working on degrees, both undergraduate and graduate degrees. And when you ask them where they're going, they will tell you online universities, Capella, Walden University, University of Phoenix, Western Governors University. But what they won't say is many of our own state institutions, because our own state institutions have been slow to provide the kinds of online learning opportunities that rural communities are desperate for. That is in flux right now in Colorado and is changing. And really, I've seen a change over the past couple of years, and primarily because of the voices that are being raised throughout the state, essentially demanding better access to our universities and our institutions of higher ed. But that resonated with me. Thank you.
That was one of the themes that emerged from our research as well, that this idea that so many of our rural students live in these areas that we call college deserts because they don't have within driving distance access to a lot of higher education. So that they do turn to those more online options, and just looking at different paths that are available to them. That's why that was a theme that emerged in our data.
Yes.
So if we'd had more time to talk about the college and career trajectory, that would have come forward a little bit more, but I'm really glad you mentioned how they're intersectional, because they're clearly, there is so much overlap, right? Because even in teacher preparation, opportunities for rural students who would like to become teachers, then access to higher education programs at all becomes an issue.
And again, thank you, Dr. Fulton, for sharing what resonated with you. We appreciate it. And we're looking forward to hearing from you in a little bit and sharing some of the work that you're doing in this space. Any other thoughts or reflections that you may have? Anyone else?
I would also say, I don't want to monopolize, but the GAO report that came out this past year on the teacher shortage, the national teacher shortage, they pointed to where it's most profound and where it is most problematic is the American West, our rural areas, and high poverty areas. It also included high poverty urban areas. But as you can see, I mean, the West rural high poverty is where Colorado is a nexus of these problems and these challenges. And so, the Colorado Department of Ed has put together, with of course, the support of legislators, a host of different ways for Coloradoans to become teachers, which we'll get to here in a minute. But I did want to point out that GAO study, and the Education Trust also had a great study. It was either last year or the year before, about the teacher shortage and what can be done on the short term and in the long term to address those. And some of those findings definitely match what your group has been putting together, Sarah.
It definitely rose to the top as an area of high concern. I'm going to also put one more link in the chat, which is the link to the article that we mentioned. So there's now a link to both the agenda itself and then also to the article that tells you more about the research process. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. And I don't know, Bob, if you have a link to that study that you shared, the GEO, that you could drop or possibly. And no stress right now, because I know you're getting ready to present. So just maybe later. Thank you. And I'm going to turn this, it's like perfect timing. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Fulton as he talks about the great work and the resources that he has curated over time in this whole rural space through the Colorado Center for Rural Education. And I'm going to let him introduce himself and just talk about some of the things that he has going on. And then we'll move on to some reflection, and then we'll move into our panel. Bob.
Okay, thanks so much, Beth. And let me see. It says I can't start screen sharing while the other participant is sharing. Let's see now. Okay.
And we have your slides if you need us to, okay.
Yeah,
That's okay. Go ahead.
All right. So Roseanne sends her regrets, her love and regrets. She's having a root canal right as we speak. So it's a real big regret for her, and but she does send her love and wishes she could be with us. And let's jump right in. Rural Colorado needs teachers, and let's see here. In 2021-22, which is the most current data that we have, we had 652 positions filled by shortage mechanisms. And those shortage mechanisms include long-term substitutes, retired educators returning to the classroom, alternative candidates, which are prepared outside of our traditional universities, and emergency candidates, also prepared differently than we consider traditional. In addition to those 652 that were filled with shortage mechanisms, we had 295 positions that were unfilled for the whole year. And you can imagine that this causes quite a bit of consternation amongst our leaders out there in rural Colorado. So much so that I'm fielding phone calls every day, and took one today from Yuma, a principal in Yuma who is looking for a 5-6 science teacher and wonders what she's going to do about it. And that's just a continuous stream of phone calls throughout the day. This next slide shows that while it's a problem, it's also a growing problem. And we don't have 22-23 data yet. But as you can see, over the past 4 years, in terms of unfilled positions, we went from 71 in 2018, well, that's supposed to be 2019, to 295 in 21-22. So nearly 4 times the number of unfilled positions. And from what I'm hearing in the field, I anticipate that number to grow significantly again this year. Any questions about this, the need data and the fact that this need is growing? The next thing I'd like to jump into is what we call Educator Recruitment and District Supports. This is a document that was co-produced by the Colorado Department of Ed and the Colorado Center for Rural Ed when we realized that we were doing some of the same work, and we wanted to make sure that we were as comprehensive in our list of supports out there for future teachers and in-service educators, as well as rural leaders, human resources directors, superintendents, principals. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, and well, the first 6 pages of this document are all supports directly to teachers and future teachers. I'm going to jump right to district supports. And in hopes that this is helpful to the group watching today, I don't expect anybody to memorize any of this stuff, but if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. We also have 2 fantastic folks, at least 2 from CDE, that can also answer your questions. Travis Garot and Derek Martin are on the call today. And we all share a responsibility for getting this word out far and wide to as many rural leaders as possible. First one is Rural Alternative Licensure Stipend. And that is for people who have a bachelor's degree in a community, maybe have thought about being a teacher, but have never gone through a teacher prep program. And what we can do is help them become a teacher through, leaders in the field can hire them immediately, and we put them through an alternative licensure program, which can be through a BOCES or actually through an institution of higher ed. If you remember from the chart before, we have quite a few of those alt licensure folks being prepared as teachers for our rural communities. Without alternative licensure, the crisis would be far worse in rural Colorado, right? And that goes without saying, but alternative licensure and the support that we've gotten from the legislators and from the Colorado Department of Ed have really helped us fill classrooms with highly competent alternative licensed educators. I think it's important to mention that CDE has been tracking data on alternative licensure, and those folks stay in the positions just about as long as people who go to our traditional teacher prep programs. Another interesting anecdote is oftentimes they do better on the praxis exams that are teacher exams in Colorado than the folks who went through the teacher prep programs themselves. Next up. In Colorado, you are allowed as a leader to hire somebody who does not have a bachelor's degree or an educator preparation program, but has a strong background to support the learning and content. That we call that adjunct instructor authorization. And I just spoke to a person from one of our rural communities last week who has a degree from an ACICS accredited school, so not a regionally accredited, HLC accredited school. In Colorado, the Colorado Department of Ed expects our teachers to have graduated from a regionally accredited university. So this person is an artist, graduated from a school that's not HLC accredited, but she's a practicing artist. She knows art, and she wants to be a teacher for this rural school district and has been approached by the superintendent to do just that. And the one opportunity for her to become a teacher is through this adjunct instructor authorization. It's renewable. It's a 3-year authorization and it's renewable indefinitely. So in actual fact, she doesn't need to go to a regionally accredited institution in order to be an art teacher for this district. There are many other examples of this, welding, etc., that we could point to, but this is one that just came up in the past 2 weeks. We are also encouraging our districts to reach out to the universities that are preparing teachers and actually recruit student teachers. In times past, our school districts waited for people to show up at the door. We're actually asking our rural leaders to reach out to the universities and recruit student teachers from those institutions. And my own institution where I teach, and my wife runs the Center for Urban Ed, we have a very nice way in which leaders can reach out to these future teachers and recruit them right on the spot. We also have what's called Teacher of Record license, and this is for people, by statute, they need to have 3/4 of their degree program done. But I know for a fact, as a former superintendent, that we had somebody who only had 2 years of their degree done, and we were able to get special approval from the Colorado Department of Ed to hire that person. She had a strong background in working with children, including several years in early childhood. She also had a 2-year associate's degree. We hired her through this teacher of record for a 5th grade teaching position. She finished her degree in 2 years per the directions from the Colorado Department of Ed, and was a successful 5th grade teacher for us for several years. Another one that I think Brian might be talking about here later is to hire J1 exchange teachers. We partner closely with Steve Johnston from Colorado Learning. There has been an explosion of J1 exchange teachers. And what I'm hearing from leaders in the field is not only is this an acceptable proposition, it's actually a desirable one. Our exchange teachers are coming in with advanced degrees in the content areas that they're teaching. They have great classroom management, great rapport with parents, great interpersonal relationships with staff. And my initial knee jerk on J1s was to raise an eyebrow, but from what I'm hearing from the field, these folks have been incredible additions to rural Colorado. We also have online learning available through Colorado Digital Learning Solutions. Dan Morris is our good friend over there who runs that and has been running it for over 20 years. He has over 6,000 students enrolled in Digital Learning Solutions now. There's also a new kid on the block called CC Live, which is being run through the Colorado River BOCES. And CC Live is providing synchronous teachers online in math and science. Let's see, to me, this is the most important one, and it's how we address diversity, development of diversity, equity, inclusion in our rural communities, and that is to hire paraprofessionals who would like to become teachers. Everywhere I go, I'm advocating for principals, superintendents, HR directors, to change the way in which they understand the role of paraprofessional in our schools, and to change the way they recruit, including the job descriptions. For me, a paraprofessional should be someone who has a written and explicit plan for how they're going to become a teacher in the district. And it is through this Grow Your Own that I believe our rural schools are going to be able to live and thrive within an environment where they're not getting enough teachers from our teacher prep programs at the universities. I do have one other thing, and that is, which I just learned at the Southern Superintendent's meeting last week, and that is Colorado Association for School Executives has a very exciting program that they're putting together with Sherry Wrench. And their focus is on sharing teachers across districts, so if there's a shortage of a math teacher, but we have a math teacher in one district, we share them, and also a focus on staff reorganization. I know personally as a superintendent that our rural schools can benefit, and in virtually every rural school can benefit from a careful conversation about how to organize the school most successfully to make the best use of our human talent and best meet the needs of students. In my own case, I had classroom sizes of between 4 and 17, and the obvious that I know everybody thinks of is, well, combine and have some multi-age classrooms. And so, I mean, those are just quick ideas, but every school could benefit from doing a careful look at the way in which they're organized. Thank you, Beth, for allowing me this venue, and I look forward to questions, if not right now, but later, and enjoyed being able to present today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate it. And just the wealth of resources and strategies that you've shared have been most helpful. And I know a lot of folks were taking notes feverishly, trying to get it all down. If we can go to, if Bob, if you can stop sharing, then Rachel, thank you. Ray can pull up the slide deck. Thank you. And let's take a moment to reflect on some of the pieces that Dr. Fulton shared with us. You can go to the end of these, Ray. Sorry. I should have queued you up. I should have warned you. Sorry, caught you off guard.
It's a long slide deck, Ray.
Thank you. As Ray is pulling up, and you have Dr. Fulton's contact information here, you can always reach out through email. And if you have any questions or any reflective thoughts, please feel free to add those to the chat, or if you want to open up and make a comment. Anything that resonated with anyone?
I'm fascinated about the conversation around the J1 visas, and would love to a little bit deeper of a dive of what countries people are pulling from. Is it to support, dual language programs, or is it just starving for more teachers in the pipeline? I don't know, Bob, if you can share any other research there.
Is Brian Childress on the call, Beth?
He is.
Oh, okay.
He'll be queuing up for the panel in a little bit. Yes.
Brian, I defer to you because you have a lot more experience actually hiring folks and in supervising, managing the team there.
Yeah, so Fort Morgan School District, where I'm the Human Resource Director, is doing a lot with the J1 candidates. And we've had success with candidates from the Philippines, from Costa Rica, from Ghana, and we are utilizing those candidates in language programs, in Spanish for native speakers programs, in elementary, kinder, science, math, mainstream classes. And our candidates are being very successful. We do some screening ahead of time to make sure that their English and their pedagogy are up to what we expect. But we're seeing that we can choose from the best of the best from those countries. And so we're getting really highly qualified candidates in, and they're having great success. Now, J1s have a shelf life of 3 years with a 2-year extension. So The downside of the J1 process is that at some point they'll have to go home. We get them trained up and our community likes them, but they end up having to return back to the country unless they get a waiver. And we've been successful with some of our J1 candidates obtaining waivers and moving them into an H1B process, which we're able to get them another 6 years with us if they're able to do that. So, but so far so good. We've been fairly successful with our candidates. So I'm happy to talk more about that if you've got.
Thank you, Dr. Childress.
And along with that, rurals are not the only districts that are recruiting J1s. Denver has many hundreds of J1s, and many of those J1s come from South America and are fluent in Spanish and English. And so, there's a lot of ways to really work with the J1 program to get your district's needs met.
Thank you. If we can go to the next slide, right? Thank you. And Dr. Childress has already kind of started the conversation, but I wanted to make sure that we have time for this rich discussion following these great presentations that have taken place. And I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. And I see that I thought I saw Dr. Cody. I think my Zoom just hit her.
Good afternoon. This is Marcia Cody.
Thank you. And you can go ahead and introduce yourself, Dr. Cody, so that folks can know the school district that you currently serve as superintendent and the work that you're currently doing in this space.
Right. And I'm not Dr. Cody. I just have an EDS. So just wanted to be clear on that.
No worries. You're almost there. You're almost there. Go ahead.
There you go. I'm superintendent for Haxton School District, which is up in the northeast part of Colorado. A very small district. It has about 350 students pre-K through 12, and the community is of about 1,000 people.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Cody. We appreciate you joining us today. And Dr. Childress, if you could introduce yourself, because I know you work in that HR space and you started some of that conversation. So it's going to be good to hear.
Yeah, I'm Brian Childress. I'm the Director of Human Resources for Fort Morgan School District. We're a community of about 11, 15,000, somewhere in there, depending on how big you draw our boundary. And we've got 3,300 kids, 8 schools. We have 250 teachers in our district, and we are seeing shortages anywhere from special ed all the way to elementary and language arts and things that even 3 years ago we would not have had a shortage as a. We're struggling to find just about everybody. So we're pulling out all the stops and using a number of tricks to fill those.
Oh, we thank you again for taking time out of your extremely busy schedules to be with us. If we can go to the next slide, right? So we're going to queue these questions up for Dr. Childress and Superintendent Cody. And if we can go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to let you go first. And we heard from the National Rural Education Association about some of these challenges, but what unique challenges do rural leaders face with recruiting and retaining educators that you have witnessed firsthand? Superintendent Cody, do you want to share first?
Sure, I would agree with what was listed in the research. The job opportunities for spouse and the pay equity is those are definitely components. And I would say housing is huge in Haxton. We've had the same population in Haxton of 1,000 people for decades, almost a century. And so it's almost like when one leaves, one comes in, and there's not a lot of desire to build or to partner with, to have some sort of a housing division. And so even as we recruit educators, where they will live and the cost of living is so high that is definitely a challenge. Another challenge is with recruiting and retaining is also the amenities, having trails or entertainment for adults, especially our younger adults, but adults of all ages. They want to be outside and hiking and climbing and biking, and we just don't have that in this community. There isn't a gym for them to go to. There's not those opportunities to expand culture. You need to drive a ways to get to even a theater. So that makes it very difficult, especially when you're talking about needing a specific license. Similar to Brian, we have so many needs. We have two openings for special education teachers, which seems small in comparison to urban school districts, but for us, that's huge. That's the entire special education staff. That means we don't have one for next year at this time. So, and of course, a range of others, but those are just a few. The pay equity, because it costs a lot to run a rural school district. You have to complete all the same reporting that an urban district does. You have all those needs, all those roles that fit in. So the pay, it is hard to increase that pay just because there's just not enough dollars to go around to fulfill all those roles and to keep up with the pay. But the cost of living is similar with housing to a lot of other areas that pay more. Brian, your thoughts?
I think, Marcia, you covered most of them. The only thing that I would add is the cost of insurance is really high for school districts, which insurance and those benefits compete with our ability to add the salary. The reason that insurance is high is because healthcare is hard to find, and when you can find it, it's expensive. So, Nidhi in itself is just a scarce resource. Our local hospitals oftentimes share providers, and a provider will operate in Denver and then send somebody out to Fort Morgan one day a week. And so we only see that provider one day a week. So little things like that you don't think about necessarily, but actually end up having a pretty big impact on the community. But yeah, there are definitely challenges.
Thank you, Dr. Childers. What strategies or approaches have you used to attract and recruit educators? And think also about retention as well. You talked about the J1 visa teachers that you have worked to utilize. Dr. Childers, any other strategies or approaches?
Fort Morgan went in front of the state board and got permission to run an alternative licensure program in-house. And so that strategy has been really effective for us. We had about 12 alternative licensure teachers last year. We'll do another, say, 8 or 10 next year, but we're also cooperating with some of the districts around us to offer that service. And so it's become a little bit of a revenue generator for us, as well as being something that we can do in-house. The other piece that I would add is this year we're looking at really changing our salary schedule and doing some things like taking steps from $840 down to $400, and then pushing that step savings into the beginning salary number. And with any luck, we'll be able to move our starting salary up significantly. So some of those strategies can be effective. We'll see. We also are going to a 4-day week. A lot of rural communities around us are on a 4-day week. Fort Morgan traditionally had a 5-day week. So we're hoping that blend of salary and work-life balance to attract some folks our way.
Thank you. Superintendent Cody?
We've kind of utilized a lot of the strategies that Dr. Fulton shared. We do have an adjunct licensed educator. It's an art teacher. She started in January. We also have several alternative licensed teachers. We have a great alt program through our Northeast BOCES. They've done a great job. And I know, Brian, I think that's a nice to have that on campus. I've heard great things about that. We're talking about retention bonuses as well as sign-on bonuses for this coming year. We also have 2 paraprofessionals. I've connected with Dr. Fulton to get into the pipeline to be those educators of record and to pursue their degree. We share 2 teachers or 2 staff members, I should say, with a neighboring school district. One is housed in Haxton and they teach 75% of their day here and then 25% of their day in a neighboring district. The other one is a technology director. So we share him 50% and he serves in each school district every other day. Another thing that we're looking at is we're working with Sherry Wrench, and Dr. Fulton talked about this through the Colorado Association of School Executives, and looking at just expanding our opportunities for students outside of what we already know with our asynchronous online opportunities. So looking at partnering either with St. Vrain, Fort Morgan has also come up as on that radar too, which is where Brian is a part of, and what we can do to also doing that staff reorganization. So we had a long conversation the other day with staff and talked about what are our assets, what do we want to make sure we retain and hold on to, and where are our gaps, and then what are some possible solutions, and then taking a look at our master schedule, how can we rethink this, also looking at our graduation requirements and how can we rethink our graduation requirements to create greater flexibility. So those are all parts that we're doing right now.
Thank you. I love the whole asset-based approach and trying to look at things that we can build off of. Thank you again for sharing. How have you recruited, retained, and supported diverse educators? I know with the J-1 visa situation, that's definitely, those are diverse educators that you're bringing into your district. Dr. Childress.
Yeah, so I mean, that's one resource for us. We're probably like every other school district that we would really like to have our teaching force mirror our student population. And so we're competing against a number of other folks for a limited pool. That being said, we are having some success bringing our paras who have an associate's degree, bringing them up. And we have been working successfully with Western and Gunnison. And they've got a nice online format to do year 3, and then year 4 is a practicum year. So we've had some success with that in terms of recruiting and retaining our diverse educators. Of course, we're doing as much as we can within our own culture and the culture of our buildings to do some affinity grouping when we've got professional development and expressive and honor cultural differences. But I think that pathway of bringing up some of our maybe non-traditional candidates and supporting the process, helping them with ERR dollars and those applications, those have been pretty successful for us. Thank
you, Dr. Childress. Mm-hmm. Superintendent Cody.
Anything we've done is exactly what Dr. Childress said, and it's really using paraprofessionals, that paraprofessional pipeline. I wish we were better at this because it's a need, and it's a need to recruit, and it's a need, just like Brian said, it's a need to recruit staff who look like our students, and so that's just constantly a desire.
And thank you, because the research shows that for student outcomes to increase and improve, students need to see staff that look like them. So thank you for sharing that. If we can go to the next slide, Ray. So what has been effective or challenging with your strategies?
Beth, can I address that last slide just for a second?
Ray, can we step back a second, Dr. Fulton?
Roseanne's program at the Center for Urban Ed is exclusively focused on the development of paraprofessionals. And she has about 175 paraprofessionals currently. We're looking at adding another 60 in coming up in August. And when we talk about diversifying the teaching force, I mean, paraprofessionals are frontline. They're more diverse. They're situated in the communities that they're in service to. They, more than our traditional teacher prep programs at universities, reflect the communities that they're in service to. And so it's another reason why we're focused on the development of paras, besides the obvious fact that they're there and they have expressed an interest in becoming teachers. And they like schools. I mean, they're employed in schools. But I think it's also important around the issues of equity and inclusion that we have mentors in the field. And, so through the Center for Urban Ed, we use a mentor model, and those mentors also reflect the communities that we're in service to. And so that's a real challenge for rural Colorado going forward, is how are we going to really build this paraprofessional to teacher pipeline? How are we going to work with the community to get the mentors that we need to support those new teachers, whether they're alternative licensed teachers or new from universities or paraprofessionals to teachers? How are we going to support them so that they can be successful? So there's a lot of work left to do there, without question. But I do believe that Fort Morgan and Haxton are doing the kinds of things that are really changing the way we understand teacher recruitment and retention.
Thank you, Dr. Fulton. And I saw Superintendent Cody and Dr. Childress shaking their head. They were in total agreement with you. So thank you. If we can move to that next slide, Ray, and look at those next set of questions. Thank you. So what's been effective? And I know that we heard a lot of the strategies that both Dr. Fulton shared and the challenges that the National Center has shared as well. So what's been effective or challenging with your strategies?
Well, I'll build on what Bob just said, which is Fort Morgan did invest in building some of that infrastructure to make sure that our J1s are successful, our alt-ed candidates are successful. And so what that looks like are instructional coaches at the building level and also at the district level. And so, most districts have principals that are strong instructional leaders. Most principals do some sort of mentoring within the building, but there's that extra layer of instructional coaching. We added also an alternative licensure director who works directly with our alternative licensed folks. So whatever it looks like, my word of encouragement to districts that are considering building sort of multiple layers of different types of people in your district, pay attention to the infrastructure that you'll need for those people to be successful. The instructional coaches really make a huge difference in getting those non-traditionally education folks, getting them up to speed on classroom management, getting them up to speed on curriculum, getting them up to speed on assessments and data. And so just planning for that system-wide piece has been a challenge, but also has yielded some quick successes for folks kind of stepping into classrooms that maybe weren't from teacher prep programs.
Thank you, Dr. Childress. And yes, the whole systems approach and supporting through your coaches definitely makes sense. Superintendent Cody?
I would say a key piece similar to what Brian was sharing is with our alternative licensure, that person has been a coach within our district. Being a small rural, we don't have like an instructional coach because we're only 340 students, pre-K-12 or 350. And so we don't have that significant role, which would be key. And it makes me wonder, like we've been talking about J1 visas and okay, maybe that would be a route to go for some of our needs. And might be something that we need to look into to say, hey, is this something Northeast BOCES could provide for the small rural school districts in our area as an instructional coach, particularly for their teachers with those J1 visas. But I would say that adjunct license was key. That was a lifesaver for us to be able to still pay somebody a teacher salary, is whatever that might be able to pay them at that licensed rate, and also acknowledge all the experience that she had owning her own art business and a studio and all of that for years and years. So that adjunct license was key. Also, I do think this work highlighting just a new way of thinking how to address recruitment and retention with Sherry Wrench and Case is going to be huge. Rethinking graduation requirements. We are also part of something called ILOP. It's an Innovation Learning Opportunities pilot program that you apply for through CDE, and it allows our students to participate in college classes and internships, but still count them as full-time students. And so it gives us that flexibility to say, okay, if you're doing an internship or you're engaged in an online class through St. Brain School District or something else that could be done at home, we wouldn't have to have a staff member overseeing that if you keep a certain grade level. So some of those things are working, and we still have challenges, because if we did do a J1 visa, one of the challenges would be is housing. Where would they stay? Where would they live? So things, we still have work to do, lots of work to do.
No, thank you, Superintendent Cody, but you have some things in place that are just definitely making a difference. So thank you again for sharing that. Let's look at the next question because we have a couple minutes left. What are some lessons learned or key considerations for attracting and retaining teachers? And you've shared some things, but if you had to share one lesson learned or key consideration, what would it be?
I would say it has to be collaborative. This is too big of a problem to do on our own. I can't thank Dr. Fulton enough, and our BOCES and Case and Colorado Department of Education. And we're in a crisis mode. I mean, gosh, we had a shortage a few years back, but now we're at a point that it is almost scary, like, okay, where are we getting a special ed teacher? Because there's nobody else here. I don't have a population to draw from. Nobody wants to drive 2.5 hours from the Denver metro area, right? I mean, nobody that I know of. So it is scary, and that's why we have to work together to think about this differently. We can't think about education like we did even 5-10 years ago, pre-pandemic. We've got to think about it and go, okay, what is it? What are the outcomes we're wanting for students, and how do we make it a learning experience, their high school learning experience, and even pre-K-12, one that meets the needs of where they're going. And so we've talked about those opportunities post-secondary, for after graduation, how can we give them more internships? And so maybe we don't need a teacher there. Maybe we can think about this in a different way. And all of that requires people that are a lot smarter than me. And us working together, putting our brains together and going, all right, how can we solve this problem?
No, I love the partnership. It definitely makes a difference, and it helps us think differently beside how we normally stay within ourselves. So thank you again, Superintendent Cody. Dr. Childress, what would you think about some of those lessons learned or key considerations?
Yeah, I'll just build on what Marcia said, which is, there isn't a silver bullet, right? And the beauty of small districts is that we can be flexible and nimble. So we need to be looking for the solution that works best for us. And whether that's an adjunct position, or partnering for alternative licensure, or partnering with the university to get paras into place quickly. It's not a silver bullet. We're gonna pull a little here and a little there and a little here and a little there, and it together. I do like what Marcia said about trying to think about how to deliver education differently. I think that that's fertile ground, and that's an important conversation.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Dr. Childrich. And you've kind of hit on, both of you kind of touched upon the whole EPP partnership and the collaboration piece. How else would you, if you had to, I see Sam Fogelman is on, if you had to talk directly to EPPs, what would you say about how they can best partner with you all to help address this educator workforce shortage?
You know, we all have part-time jobs in education, and so my part-time job is working doing it. So I know my institution can be slow to respond. And I think listening to some of the district's sense of urgency and being a little bit responsive to that sense of urgency and trying to help be part of the conversation and be problem solvers would be, you know, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Childress. Superintendent Cody. And I love that whole listening. Listening is always important. And moving quickly is what I heard also.
So
Superintendent Cody.
conducted my own little tiny little focus group. So this is not, you know, good research, but just talking to some young people in their 20s who started in education and then decided to get different degrees. Because I have children at that age, and so they're friends, you know, and why not education? Why not? And some of the feedback that I've received over the years is, oh, I tried that, like one tried it, and the experience was, you need to tutor this student that was a kindergartner. I don't know what to do. I have no classroom management, I have no skills. So making sure those experiences for young people are strong and rich and highly supported. The more support we can provide it to make it so they know that this is a strong career, an opportunity to serve, an opportunity to make an impact. Another is the marketing, and I've talked to a couple of different institutions about this, is like somehow we need to market education to young people. We need to make it cool again. There's just a feeling and a flavor right now, a belief that, gosh, you don't go into education. Don't do that. You're going to be poor. You're going to, whatever that is, and to address conceptions publicly and like a PR campaign and say, let's do this. You know, we've got to band together. We've got to work together to recruit young people to come into education, to meet the needs of young people coming up. If we don't start building up an interest and helping to encourage people to become educators, this shortage / crisis is going to become a lot bigger deal. And of course, we all need to engage in advocacy to raise pay and to address school finance. In the state of Colorado, that finance formula really hasn't been addressed since the 90s. And we're trying to run a technologically savvy school district with special education needs that were not even in the realm of thinking in the 90s. And so trying to do all that we're doing from finance formula that's decades old is ignorant and ridiculous and silly, in my opinion. So we've got to push that forward to say our young people are worth it, our future is worth it. And so going back to our educator prep partners, it's, you know, let's market them and let's support them. And how can we have these warm handoffs with school districts, just to connect with what Brian said? You know, sometimes we're slow. Let's make sure we are connecting them to the right people so that they are receiving that support and those connections and that communication that they need.
Thank you, Superintendent Cody. And I totally agree with you. I am a product of a teacher cadet program here in South Carolina. And I know that Colorado has a similar program in their system, because I was not going to be an educator. And until I had the experience of tutoring a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy in math. And he told his mom, I got it, I understand. And it was like, I'm sold. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and have been in this space now for over 20 plus. I'm not going to tell you exactly how many, but 20 plus years. Okay. So thank you for that. If we can go to the next slide. So hearing from all of our presenters, what was one takeaway that you like to share? And this is an audience question. It's not just up to our presenters. What's one takeaway from you that you'd like to share? Something that you'll go and talk at the kitchen table tonight about, or reach out to a friend about.
I think what Marcia Cody just said kind of resonated with me. You know, how we're talking about how we can remove barriers to licensure, how we can provide funding, how we have different tracks like the adjunct authorization, all that, but not a lot of people are talking about how we motivate kids, how we engage with kids, and maybe have our teachers recruiting teachers. You know, I think the marketing, it's in your school districts. I think in every classroom, if every teacher is saying, I love my job, you should be a great teacher, I love the way you help little Johnny, I think you'd make a great teacher. I think we'd start to see some of that turn around, but there's not a whole lot of focus on that. So I'm glad you brought that up, Marcia.
Thank you for sharing that. That would be powerful. Can you imagine when you go to the grocery store or go to church and talk about, you know, I just love my job. And you say that and they say, well, what do you do? I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that alone would have people thinking differently? And Sam, I see you came on camera. Yes. No, that's Derek. Did you have a comment? I thought that was Sam. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, thank you. Just to piggyback what Travis was saying, you know, I tell school leaders, district leaders all the time, I think the greatest reservoir of talent that you have is sitting in a classroom in your school right now. And I think it's something that, you know, I used to work in politics, and so you don't have to work in politics to know that if you don't define yourself, somebody's going to define you for you, and it's not going to be sometimes very, very positive. So again, I think the greatest just reservoir of talent is in schools right now. I think PR wise, I think districts have to take that bull by the horns and start putting that message out there of what makes them so great. Because again, we're talking about Eastern Plains schools, Western Slope schools here in Colorado. You know, rural can be defined a lot of different ways. And I think the housing issue, especially, I think highlights this difference in affordability, supply demand when it comes to housing. So we can say housing issues, but depending where you are in Colorado, housing issues means something totally different. So I think districts have to be out there telling people all the great things about their district. I'm a farm kid from South Dakota, and so, you know, for me, Eastern Plains, if you market it right, I'm there. You know, so I think it's embracing what you have, being authentic about it, and spreading the good word about what makes your district so great.
Yeah. I love that, embracing what you have, because that's it. And I can give you peace of mind if you come and work in the country. I used to tell when I used to go recruiting for teachers, and they're like, you could sit out in the back and just enjoy the view and just have peace. Something else, another takeaway someone would like to share from today's presenters, and think about from you heard the national perspective from the National Rural Education Association, and you heard Colorado's Dr. Fulton shared Colorado's landscape as well in this space, and from the actual practitioners that are working to make things happen in their rural districts. Something else that you heard that resonated with you that you'll take away and talk about tonight. Or maybe tomorrow after you sleep on it a while.
I'll just share that I enjoyed hearing the school leaders' perspectives, especially the various things that you all are doing to collaborate together. You know, I think partnerships are one of the most important things that rural schools really excel in. And that's why one of the themes of the rural research agenda is partnerships and community relationships, because there really is strength in partnerships. And so listening to you talk about that, I thought was really exciting. And, you know, those small sample focus groups are often really impactful for informing practice in rural communities. So I thought that was very exciting to hear about.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm totally with you. It made me have a moment. And I was like, if I could go back to school, yes, and be in a school district, yes. Sam, I've been calling your name all day and I see your hand is raised. Yes.
Once you said it 3 times, I had to appear. Beth. So, I apologize. I can't be on camera today, but
You're fine. You are
I
fine.
appreciate a couple of things that I heard today. One, I've been in conversations with Bob and with Travis and with Derek before about pushing our institutions to get those online programs up and running a lot more. That's really sort of a constant that we sort of bring up with them a lot of times is finding ways for them to spread out across the state in other ways to try and reach those folks that really need those programs. So we'll obviously continue to do that. But I also heard Marcia talking a little bit about, you know, trying to open up those communication pathways between districts and institutions. You know, sometimes state agencies kind of talk to one or the other, but I know just in dealing with institutional folks and ed prep folks for a while now, you know, sometimes they can get pretty siloed, and that even happens within their own programs. So just trying to take away how can we promote to them that working with the districts is more than just creating MOUs for their student teachers or for clinicals or something like that. How can we open up those relationships a little bit more and create more dialogue so that we can find solutions together? And I know that in my position, I mean, I have a lot of interaction with those folks in those programs, and often it's, you know, something that's, you know, has to do with reauthorizing their program, you know, something that's statutory, but trying to find those ways to be a little more creative about bringing, you know, these different sides of the communities together and getting that work done a little bit more efficiently is certainly something that we need to do better. So that's something I'm taking away.
Thank you, Sam. And I definitely love the dialogue. And that was something, I know the whole partnership piece and just folks coming to the table. And I see Kate's hand. Kate.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I'll just piggyback on what Sam just said. And I've heard this in a couple of recent webinars that we've had with our EPP partners through Teach, you know, is people that are hungry for that connection between the EPPs and the school districts, and how we potentially can help facilitate some of that conversation. So I loved listening in on those thoughts. And then I also want to celebrate that we are about to be launching an amazing ad with our Teacher of the Year here in Colorado. It's me coming out this week, celebrating the craft. He's a music teacher, actually, in the Front Range in Aurora School District. So, you know, pushing out that message of the love of teaching. So thank you for the conversation. I've got 2 pages of notes. It's been great.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. Anyone else?
Beth, I'll go.
Yes,
so
Karen.
I'm sitting here listening to all of these great tactics and you know, processes for filling positions and potential processes. And I'm really struck by how and I'm encouraged that we're thinking both in the short term, like what might be some techniques that Marcia might be able to use to fill the special ed position she has open for the fall, but also thinking long term about processes to put in place with relationships with prep programs and grow your own type initiatives, so that not only will we be able to hopefully fill those positions for next fall, but also down the road not be in such a crisis.
Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn. Any last takeaways? We have about 5 minutes left, and I know we have to move on to the next slide, Ray. But if you think of something, please drop in the chat or reach out, because we follow up as we close out. We can go to the next slide, Ray. And the next slide. All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Superintendent Cody and to Dr. Childridge. We definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your extremely busy schedules to be with us. Dr. Fulton, thank you again for sharing all of the resources and data and everything else that you have. And y'all just saw just a piece of what he has, because as you saw, that was a very comprehensive presentation that he has, that he could do a 2-hour session on all of that and go through it. And then to the National Rural Education Association, thank you. You are doing, all of you are doing great work, and just you taking the time to share with us has been just a rich use of our time on today. And please know that you are welcome to join us on June the 5th for our next session. And we're focusing in on grow your own during that conversation. And you're going to get a chance to hear from actual students that are taking part. And we are just excited about that opportunity. It's always good to have student voice when we are trying to do work. And I see a lot of thank yous in the chat, and we can go to the next slide. And I think you'll see our team here. And on behalf of the Region 12 Comprehensive Center and our folks listed here, I say thank you for your time. I've enjoyed the discussion. I'm going to really go back and look at this recording, because I want to go back and take notes, because I was trying to take notes and it's hard to facilitate and take notes at the same time. But I know that we appreciate you, and we don't take your spending the afternoon with us for granted. Thank you. All right. And we can stop recording.